South Africa issues arrest warrant for former First Lady of Zimbabwe, Grace Mugabe. Campaigns in Kinshasa stopped amid fears of an outbreak of violence just days to a critical presidential election in DR Congo. And Madagascans decide who, between two former presidents, will become the country's next leader. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Karen Roberts, live in Nairobi. Rama joins me now with all your business headlines.
Thank you very much, Karen. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Competition for farming and grazing land is fueling conflict in central Nigeria. And the head of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, is applauding Ghana's economic reforms so far. We'll explain why and, of course, provide a lot more content somewhere in the hour. For now, though, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Karen.
Thank you, Rama. The former First Lady of Zimbabwe, Grace Mugabe, is now a wanted person. A warrant for her arrest has been issued by South Africa following the dissolution of her diplomatic immunity by the state's prosecuting authority. She's facing charges of allegedly assaulting Gabriella Engels, a young model in an hotel in Johannesburg last year. The former First Lady had defended herself, saying it was an act of self-defense, describing the model as intoxicated at the time of the alleged attack. She was later allowed to return home after applying for diplomatic immunity. However, that immunity was overturned by a court this year after she said the victim challenged the decision. The police say they are seeking Interpol's help to enforce the warrant. Well, we are now joined by CGTN correspondent Farai Mwakatuya, and he's in Harare to bring us the latest on this development. Farai, has there been any reaction from Zimbabwe regarding Grace Mugabe's arrest warrant in South Africa, and does she enjoy full immunity from prosecution?
Well, Karen, no official reaction as yet from state authorities here. We do anticipate that they will give some sort of reaction in the coming day or two. No response either from the Mugabe family. Under law, it is only the former head of state, in this case President Robert Mugabe, who enjoys immunity, and not any of his family members, even his immediate family members. And so if required to, and if it came to it, the former First Lady would face charges in any court. And we know that even here in the past, there have been attempts to try and initiate charges against her. I know, she had been implicated at one point in an ivory smuggling scheme, amongst others. So certainly she can be prosecuted.
And how likely would you say it is that Zimbabwe will agree to hand over the country's former First Lady to South African authorities?
Well, I think on one hand, the authorities here may be bound by international law and the need to, keep diplomatic ties in place, and if are compelled to, may then be required to hand her over or cooperate with the investigation that is underway. But my view is that it is very unlikely that President Emmerson Mnangagwa or his administration would want to do something that might embarrass or cause discomfort or affect the former head of state in any way. We know that, he has spoken very glowingly of his predecessor, President Robert Mugabe, recently, saying that he is the founding father of Zimbabwe, that his legacy is intact, and that his government and indeed himself will do anything they can to assist him and to support him. And in that respect, I don't see them doing anything that might affect him in this way. We also know that the former leader is ailing and is not feeling well, and would be dependent and heavily reliant on his wife, the former First Lady, for assistance and in order to support and care for him. And so in that regard and on that basis, I think it would be unlikely that the government authorities here would hand her over to the authorities in South Africa.
Okay, thank you for that update. That was CGTN's correspondent Farai Mwakatuya there in Harare on this latest development. To election matters in the DRC now. The governor of the capital, Kinshasa, has stopped campaigning in the city ahead of Sunday's presidential vote for security reasons. Andre Kabuta said that the only way presidential candidates could campaign in Kinshasa would be through the media. This decision follows crackdowns by security forces on opposition supporters last week that killed at least 7 people. Kimbuta said in a statement that information received points to possible street confrontation between the rival political camps in the city. There are also reports that more than 100 people could have died in clashes between rival ethnic groups in northwestern part of the country this week. Well, to get more information on this, we are now joined by CGTN's Chris Ochamringa. Chris, there are fears that violence could break out in Kinshasa if campaigns were to be allowed there. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, that's right. The governor of Kinshasa, Mr. Andre Kimbuta, announced today that they had intelligence information that rival groups of presidential candidates were planning to fight on the streets, and they fear that it could turn bloody, and so they banned all rallies of presidential candidates in the city. Now, this was the day that one of the leading opposition candidates, Martin Fayulu, was returning to the capital to hold a rally, and many people had gathered at the venue where the rally was supposed to be held, but the police dispersed them and stopped journalists from filming, and they say they would go and pick him from where the arrival point and take him home so that there was no rally.
And there are reports of high casualty figures from the clashes between rival ethnic groups in the northwestern part of the DRC. How are authorities responding to this there?
Well, the authorities say they have deployed the police and the army to go and stave off the attacks by groups, the rival ethnic groups in northwestern. The area is called Mai-Ndombe province, and it so happened that there's a ethnic group called the Batende and the Banunu had a very serious fight over the weekend over a disputed location of one of their the burial of one of their tribal chiefs. And so very many people died, and the authorities are saying that they have deployed people to ensure that there's no more fighting and that the elections on Sunday go on well.
Okay, thank you for that update. That was CGTN's Chris Ochamringa there joining us from Kinshasa. Meanwhile, the Ugandan government and the UN's Refugee Agency have set aside $63 million to cater for an influx of Congolese refugees if violence breaks out in the DRC. CGTN's Hilary Yayesaka now reports.
Tensions are mounting in the DRC ahead of the presidential polls. The campaigns have been marred with acts of violence in the days leading up to the vote. Thousands of voting machines and ballot boxes were destroyed by vandals. The UN Refugee Agency fears that this situation could escalate and force many people to migrate to neighboring countries like Uganda.
With the government of Uganda and our humanitarian partners, we are preparing to receive 75,000 refugees, and this is just a planning figure for the next 3 months, and that's how we are now preparing to respond to the needs of these people. We are preparing sites, we are building the capacity of our reception centers.
The election in the DRC comes at a time of high ethnic tensions and follows an outbreak of Ebola that has claimed many lives. These are some of the reasons which could see Congolese nationals seek refuge across borders. According to figures from the UN Agency for Refugees, Uganda already hosts over 280,000 Congolese refugees. And a violent outbreak following the presidential election is likely to see this number rise. Hilary Yayesaka, CGTN, Kampala.
Well, staying in the DRC, while security is a major concern ahead of the national elections, young people in the country are hoping the polls will go ahead with little trouble. For most, it will be their first opportunity to engage in a democratic process to elect their leader.
Journalism student Jenny is doing internship at an independent TV station in Kinshasa. At 19 years old, the only president she has ever known is the incumbent Joseph Kabila. Having attained the minimum age established by law to vote, she is pleased to have a say on who will be the next president.
It's the first time that I'm allowed to vote. I want to see what it means to cast your vote. I want to see what it's like to change the president, the ruling class.
Youth make up half of the Democratic Republic of Congo's population. 21-year-old stylist Caprice dreams of one day launching her own fashion brand. She believes the country's politics have no effect on her aspirations.
For me, it doesn't matter much whether Kabila leaves or stays in power, or whether anyone takes his place. It all just leaves me cold.
2,000 kilometers east of Kinshasa in the city of Goma, campaigns are taking place amid fear of raids by armed groups. 23-year-old Jackson is a local bicycle courier. He earns just $1 or $2 per delivery, just about enough to support his wife and 3 children. His main hope is peace and is troubled ahead of the vote.
The rebels have to leave the forest and stop the killings. That's what we're hoping for from the new president.
Access to job markets is one of the top concerns for Congolese youth. Many also want better representation from leaders. But in a country that has never had peaceful transition of power, a smooth election would be a good start to ensure hope and prosperity for their future. Richard Surulnta, CGTN.
Now more election-related news. The Indian Ocean island of Madagascar has been voting in a runoff presidential poll. The country is choosing between 2 former presidents, Andry Rajoelina and Marc Ravalomanana, who came in first and second in November's first-round vote. Both camps alleged they were victims of fraud and cheating, Rajoelina winning 39% of the vote compared with 35% for Ravalomanana. Ravalomanana became president in 2002, resigning 7 years later after what was seen as a coup by Rajoelina, who was installed by the army. He ruled until 2014. Both candidates have spent lavishly on campaigns in efforts to gain the favour of voters in the election.
It's important to vote in order to prove you are Malagasy. We are voting for a Malagasy leader. What I hope for the next president would be to consider the real life of Malagasy people, to increase our means and to find fresh ideas that would work for us Malagasy people, and also to be fair in managing Madagascar's resources.
Well, it's the first time the 2 candidates have faced each other at the ballot box, but their rivalry has dominated life on the island for years. CGTN's Penina Karibe has more.
Both former mayors, both former presidents, both self-made, both incredibly wealthy. But the history between these 2 is a bitter one. Marc Ravalomanana was forced from power in 2009 and forced into exile following a coup led by Andry Rajoelina. The standoff cast Madagascar into political and economic turmoil, and the 2 were banned from running in the 2013 election thanks to pressure from the international community. 5 years on, this election shows they have lost little of their popular support, nor has their relationship improved. Ravalomanana has cast Rajoelina as a destroyer. Rajoelina has dismissed Ravalomanana as too old to revive Madagascar. Both have pitched big plans should they win. Rajoelina's promises include solar power for every home on the island and to have cow theft, one of Madagascar's priority crimes. Ravalomanana is promising free education up to 16 years and universal healthcare. They both know their electorate, the electorate know them. Voters are hoping not just that the winner can deliver, but that the loser can accept the results. Penina Karibe, CGTN in Nairobi, Kenya.
Togo's ruling party says it is determined to hold parliamentary elections scheduled for December the 20th. Now that's despite an opposition boycott and
on December 20. But violent protests have killed at least 4 people. A coalition of 14 opposition parties is shunning the polls. They are demanding for constitutional, electoral and institutional reforms. The opposition has also called on Togolese to prevent the elections from happening.
These elections
cannot but trigger violence, mourning and a lot of suffering. We have had enough here in Togo.
Togo has been engulfed in a political crisis for over a year. Thousands have taken to the streets calling for President Faure-Gnassingbe to resign. Critics say constitutional reform he has proposed will allow him to rule until 2030. Togolese security forces have been accused of using force to quell protests. Human rights NGO Amnesty International is concerned that violence will spill over post the elections. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
We're going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including... We update you on the ethnic clashes causing tension in southern Ethiopia. And why an innovative new material made from pineapple leaves is gaining popularity.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt,
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Local media sources say a deadly shooting involving the federal army, which took place inside Ethiopia's Moyale town, has claimed the lives of at least a dozen civilians. The conflict in the area continues to claim lives and has displaced thousands. The government said despite a series of interventions, violence continues. CGTN's Gurum Chala has more.
Local media has reported the insecurity in Ethiopia's Moyale town is showing little signs of returning to normalcy. It is not clear what triggers the latest shooting, which claimed at least 13 lives and wounded many more. Last week, 21 people were killed in the same area and more than 60 were wounded due to a fresh violence that erupted between the Oromo and Somali ethnic groups. Reports suggest that thousands are seeking refuge crossing the border in Kenya. Ethiopian government sources have confirmed both the regional administrations of Oromia and Ethiopia Somalia are working to return peace to the area and bring criminals to justice. But still, authorities admit the success rate of that intervention is below average. They said people are getting killed every day and a serious federal government measure is mandatory. The Moyale violence is a result of a series of ethnic clash between ethnic Oromo and ethnic Somali communities since years back on the border with Kenya. The fighting appeared to be caused by a long-standing dispute over land possession rights. Gurum Chala, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
To Zimbabwe, where earlier this year the military was accused of using live bullets to quell post-election violence. 6 protesters and bystanders died and dozens of others were injured. Now an inquest into the fatal shooting squarely blames the military and the police. The report says the military's use of force was disproportionate and unjustified. CGTN's Thuli Shabalala has more.
Zimbabweans were awaiting the presidential results with anticipation, but on August 1st, violence broke out in the capital, Harare. Citizens and members of the security forces clashed. Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa set up a commission of inquiry to investigate the violence.
The commission's finding on a balance of probabilities from all the evidence received is that the deaths of these 6 people and injuries sustained by the 35 others arose from the actions of the military and the police.
The investigation found the deployment of the military was legal. But the soldiers should have operated under police command. They used whips and rifle butts against the protesters.
The use of live ammunition directed at people, especially when they were fleeing, was clearly unjustified and disproportionate.
Ordinary Zimbabweans are satisfied with the findings.
It was quite a balanced report, but at the same time, it did not come up with conclusions as to who did what exactly.
I think the commission of inquiry was necessary. Zimbabwe is a democratic country. The president has also shown that he has those people at heart, since he decided to let people comment in the people to do the inquiry.
The inquiry, led by former South African President Kgalema Motlanthe, has also accused some opposition movement for democratic change leaders of inflaming tensions, as well as fomenting protests that it said were pre-planned. Meanwhile, the MDC has dismissed the report. It says Emmerson Mnangagwa's government is trying to whitewash the army's actions. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
A UN-supported mobile court has begun hearing cases in South Sudan's remote town of Bentiu. The courts bring legal justice to the town, and they've done that for the first time in more than 4 years. Legal proceedings will see 27 suspects go on trial over a period of 2 weeks. The last official session was held in December 2013, before civilians and court officials fled the civil war that left almost 400,000 people dead. The mobile court comprises 2 judges, 2 prosecutors, 1 investigator and 2 defense lawyers.
We are working on the judicial system so that the accused can be tried fast. They should either be charged or released if they didn't commit a crime. They should only be in jail if they did something wrong. No one should be held without trial, which would mean that justice is delayed. There are places, including Bentiu, where the administration could not bring in a judge to work because there isn't even a place to stay. There is no courthouse, there isn't equipment for the courtroom, or even police officers to work in the court. So, all this prevented the administration from trying to establish the old courts, including Bentiu, and bringing the judges for them.
Well, staying in South Sudan, members of the UN Security Council are calling on South Sudan to hold perpetrators of sexual violence accountable. The latest reported incidents involved at least 125 women and girls in the town of Bentiu. Such attacks have increased dramatically this year, despite the signing of a peace agreement. CGTN's Daniel Runches now reports.
UN Security Council members are calling for justice for victims of sexual violence in South Sudan. The Netherlands said a recent report of sexual violence in Bentiu is a serious setback to the peace process. Aid workers say that some 125 women and girls, including pregnant women, children and the elderly, sought medical care after being raped, whipped and clubbed in a government-controlled area. The Secretary-General's representative on sexual violence in conflict, Pranilla Patton, reported that there have been a total of more than 1,150 victims of sexual violence in 2018 alone, compared with just under 200 the previous year. She said girls as young as 4 had been raped in the country. Patton's calling for more resources to help provide medical and psychological services for survivors. She's urging the government of South Sudan to hold perpetrators accountable. South Sudan's permanent representative, Aki Bona Mawal, says a criminal investigation is underway and that a ministerial level report will be made public soon. Members of the Security Council also called for the establishment of a hybrid court. Other nations are calling for an end to the practice of forcible recruitment of child soldiers and detention of aid workers. Daniel Renches, CGTN, Washington.
In eastern Uganda, the death toll in Monday's bus accident in Kapchowa has risen to 21. The bus was carrying 25 staff from the National Cooperative Business Association who had been on a tour of Sipi Falls in the Mount Elgon
road after the brakes failed. It overturned several times, killing 19 people on spot. Another 2 people died hours later in hospital. The injured have been transferred to the capital Kampala for treatment. They had been on a tour of the Sipi Falls after spending 3 days in a workshop in Bali town. The driver of the bus survived with minor injuries. Police say he will be questioned when he recovers. The spot where the accident occurred is on a steep slope and the road has many sharp bends. Police say many drivers who are not familiar with the hilly terrain there often find it difficult to drive on that route. The bodies of the deceased are being returned to their loved ones. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala.
Responding to the recent violent escalation in the West Bank, the Arab League has held emergency talks in Cairo. Member states have condemned what they describe as Israeli war crimes against Palestinians. They call the United Nations to take steps to protect Palestinian citizens. Here's Adel El-Mahrouhi with more.
Following a violent wave in the occupied Palestinian West Bank, Palestine has requested an emergency meeting at the Arab League's headquarters in Cairo. After hours of talks, the Arab League has released a familiar resolution. It has held Israel responsible for the death and injury of Palestinian civilians. Member states have also called the international community to intervene.
As long as you see the same statements coming over and over during the past years, the Israeli occupation will see the League's resolutions worthless. Israel disregards UN Security Council resolutions. As long as the United States unconditionally supports Israel and vetoes all the resolutions against it, only strong stances from Arabs will change facts in our crisis.
The Arab League has described Israel's latest escalations as war crimes and asked the International Criminal Court to investigate. During the meeting, delegates have also criticized Australia's and Brazil's decisions to move their embassies in Israel to West Jerusalem.
The Arab League must pressure all states which try to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. They must lead an economic and political boycott to affect the benefits of these states. Arab countries represent a significant global power. But while countries like Indonesia took such steps, unfortunately, Arabs haven't.
The Pan-Arab Organization will form 2 delegations to lead talks with Australian and Brazilian officials in a desperate hope they'd reconsider.
The Arab League has urged its member states to continue their support to the Palestinian people so they would be able to keep resisting the Israeli occupation. It's the least they can do to at least make up for the little action Arabs have taken since the United States has moved its embassy to Jerusalem. Adel El-Mahrouhi, CGTN, Cairo.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too.
A recap of our top stories now. In South Africa, an arrest warrant has been issued for Zimbabwe's former First Lady Grace Mugabe. This stems from an alleged assault in an upmarket district of Johannesburg last year. The South African government had granted Grace Mugabe diplomatic immunity, but that immunity was overturned by a South African court this year after the alleged victim, model Gabriella Engels, challenged the decision. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, the governor of the capital, Kinshasa, has ordered a stop to campaigning in the city ahead of Sunday's presidential vote. Security has been cited as the main reason. This follows crackdowns by security forces on opposition supporters last week that killed at least 7 people and a fire that destroyed thousands of voting machines. In the Indian Ocean island nation of Madagascar, voters have been casting their ballots to select a new president in a runoff election that pits 2 former leaders against each other. In the first round of voting in November, Andry Rajoelina received 39%, while Mark Ravalomanana got 35%. And a UN-supported mobile court has now begun hearing cases in South Sudan's northern town of Bentiu. The courts brought back legal justice to the town for the first time in more than 4 years. The last official session was held in December 2013 before civilians and court officials fled the civil war that left almost 400,000 people dead. And those are the top stories that we're covering. Well, let's now go to Rama for all the latest business news. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Here's what's coming up in business. Competition for farming and grazing land is fueling conflict in central Nigeria. And ahead of the IMF, Christine Lagarde is applauding Ghana's economic reforms.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Let's start in West Africa, where competition for land resources does appear to be the primary cause of clashes in Nigeria's central belt. Expansion of farming land over there has essentially meant reduced grazing lands, and that's fueled long-running conflict. CGTN's Beryl Oro filed this report.
Analysis of land use data in the country shows that expansion of farming in Nigeria's middle belt has cut off access to grazing lands, fueling constant violence in the region. And should the coming dry seasons follow the pattern of previous years, there are fears of an outbreak of violence. Clashes in the region have often been blamed on religious and ethnic division. But close examination has shown just how much it comes down to a simple clash over resources. This year only, the clashes between herding and farming communities have reportedly killed more people than the militant group Boko Haram.
We was just in cooking before we could know it. We had some gunshots from nowhere. So the gunshot was much for us. We will have to ask, the men have to ask women and children that they should come out, maybe to see from there. I just don't know what happened. We just run away. But we saw some of them on the way.
Open grazing lands in the Middle Belt have shown a decline of about 38% between 1975 and 2013, with farming areas also deteriorating sharply.
There is no single kilometer you go through without seeing farmland all over the place. Unlike what used to happen in those days in the 50s, when the population was less. But today, roads, schools, and several other human activities have taken over settlements, the land.
We can do more, we can do differently. It always is a challenge to bring exactly the support that people need at that very moment. Now they're telling us they want to go back, we need to resettle, we need to restart life. It's another kind of support that when you arrive newly in an IDP camp. So we try to adapt the best we can to the needs of the people at the given moment in their displacement.
The shift towards farming not only reflects Nigeria's rapid growth, but also the country's efforts to diversify the economy. The central states make up about 1/3 of Nigeria's land area, with the Middle Belt accounting for almost 2/3 of the nationwide switch. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Let's move on to Sudan now. Authorities over there are trying to reduce the budget deficit, at least according to the 2019 budget that has been approved by the cabinet. Now, the budget expects economic growth of about 5.1% next year, up from this year's figure, 4%. And exports, it hopes, will go up by as much as 30% year on year. However, the country's president, Omar Hassan al-Bashir, has signaled an end to the country's fuel subsidy program. He says there will be no economic reforms if those subsidies do remain. Sudan lost up to 3/4 of its oil output to South Sudan during the secession in 2011. It was a crucial source of foreign currency earnings at the time. In October, Sudan also sharply devalued its currency. Now, back in 2015, Ghana signed a $918 million three-year agreement with the International Monetary Fund. The extended credit facility, as it was known, which was to be dispersed under 8 tranches, required the state to make quite a few economic reforms that included things like freezing public sector employment, reducing the budget deficit, and ending the Bank of Ghana's financing of the budget deficit. As that deal comes to an end, the head of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, visited the West African state to take stock of its progress. CGTN's Ucha Koronkwo was there.
It seems to be a thumbs up for Ghana, with IMF head Christine Lagarde agreeing that its economy is in a better place than it was 2 years ago. Though the country was forced to delay the 2015 extended credit facility by some 6 months, she noted the government had made important gains towards macroeconomic stability.
In the past 2 years, Ghana has implemented bold policies to reach another set of milestones. Inflation has come down to single digits. There's a primary fiscal surplus for the first time in more than a decade. And strong growth of about 7% is expected over the medium term, partly due to higher oil and gas production. Now, don't get me wrong, those are remarkable achievements. Yes. Now, every coin has two faces. Because at the same time, vulnerabilities have continued to build up, including in particular high levels of public debt, fiscal risks related to the energy sector, and vulnerabilities in the financial sector.
Other development finance institutions, such as the World Bank, agree with the IMF that Ghana's economy is on the right track. But much like the IMF, the World Bank says that its structural reforms are moving at a much slower pace than expected. For example, revenue collection in the first half of the year came in at just $4.6 billion, well below the $5 billion target. And of course, its debt burden isn't getting any better, moving from a 73% debt-to-GDP ratio in 2016 to just 67%.
And perhaps the biggest challenge is debt. That debt remains a challenge, and I think the government will need to continue looking out to manage better the debt profile and reduce the burden on the economy. So they're not yet distressed, but they're at high risk. And so better management of debt is something that Ghana is doing and needs to continue to do. We know that there have been programs to buy out domestic debt in particular, to change the debt profile.
Amongst the other concerns are the country's large non-performing loans and still relatively low levels of foreign exchange reserves. The IMF says there's still room to lift productivity and reduce income inequality by scaling up infrastructure investment. It can also further strengthen the finances of public.
Hawassa Industrial Park's water recycling plant. Here, eco-friendly manufacturing is undertaken by world-class garment and apparel manufacturers. At present, about 1.5 million litres of industrial wastewater comes to this facility every day out of the 52 factory sheds in this industry park. And this is what it looks like when the waste comes in. The result is impressive: pure water. And about 95 to 98% of that water is reused in this industry park.
Major contribution of this plant is we are saving environment, we are saving water, we are not discharging any drop of effluent out of this plant. That is, we are saving the earth water.
Hawassa Industrial Park's zero liquid discharge facility enables the recycling of almost all of the sewage disposal, and it fulfills all international standards.
This is the latest technology for RO. It's the TDS and TDS removal for ions particle for there, and this part is the EF ultrafiltration system. This is the new technology.
The plant also produces bricks for construction purposes and salt to be used by leather products manufacturers.
We are going to treat that sludge part to make bricks and all. We are generating in multiple evaporator, we are generating salts, and that salt also we can utilize in fixing of color in leather industries and all in other industries.
At full capacity, the Hawassa Industrial Park, which is built by the China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation, is expected to employ 60,000 workers and generate $1 billion in export revenue. Ethiopia now has 6 well-operating industrial parks spread across the country, and other 6 are coming into fruition soon. Though the parks host manufacturers with different areas of specialization, one thing they have in common is they are all environmentally friendly industrial parks. Grumjala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Right, and we'll leave it there for the time being. Here's what's coming up at the top of the hour. Nigeria's president has presented the country's $28 billion budget to legislators earlier today. It's an enormous spending plan, slightly smaller than what they had for 2018, though. We'll have all the details on how it's going to be funded and where the money will go in the next hour. See you at 1800 GMT. For now, though, back to Karen.
Thank you very much, Rama. Well, we are going to a short break. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including why an innovative new material made from pineapple leaves is gaining popularity.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Egypt is launching an enormous healthcare campaign. It's aiming to offer free checkups for 50 million citizens. The campaign is investigating hepatitis C infection and some non-communicable diseases. Here's Adel El Mahrouhi with more.
Dubbing it 100 million in health, Egypt is holding a massive campaign to eradicate hepatitis C. The country has the highest rates of the virus in the world. The health ministry is offering free tests nationwide. Scores turned out for the checkups.
We were astonished at the turnout. We didn't expect so many citizens will come. They wait in long lines for hours for their turn to come. It's been great. Earlier we toured Cairo districts to make them aware of the possible diseases and the importance of checkups. That may have been the reason.
The health ministry is targeting 50 million Egyptians. That's everyone above 18 years. Beside hepatitis C, the clinics also test for diabetes, checks for hypertension, and does a body mass index for every citizen.
75% of the cases are either overweight or have obesity-related diseases. That's a prime reason for hypertension and diabetes. Our main purpose is hepatitis C. The non-contagious diseases take a second priority. We're also creating a digital database for the patients in the process.
The campaign is also creating a digital database for those who've had the checkups. Those who've tested positive for hepatitis C should then be directed to the most convenient hospital for their treatment.
I did the examinations and thank God I don't have any disease. This campaign is wonderful. Many friends didn't know they had hepatitis C and they discovered because of that campaign.
The campaign is great. We want to make sure we're healthy. The results come out so fast. Doctors are treating all people nicely. My father had hepatitis C. He wasn't lucky to have such service.
All government health clinics offer the free tests. But to reach out for more people, mobile clinics are available in the streets at populous areas.
They need to increase the number of checkup trucks. So many people come. I've been here for 3 hours just to get my turn. It's a lovely idea. Most of us don't like to go to the doctors. To find a place like this is encouraging.
Egypt has raised more than 200.
The Egyptian Health Ministry says that so far 18 million Egyptians have been tested. The free tests and the checkups will continue until April next year. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Now to an incredible innovation in manufacturing. Pineapples aren't just a delicious fruit, they could be your next pair of shoes, bag or jacket. Made from the discarded leaves of the pineapples, Pinetex is a novel new textile that could, if harvested by design, sound the death knell for traditional leather production.
Spanish entrepreneur Carmen Hinojosa abandoned a career in leather goods design and manufacturing after seeing the impact of mass production on the environment. And after 8 years of development and experimentation, Hinojosa developed Pinetex.
I found this pineapple leaf fiber, which is used traditionally in the Philippines for 400 years to make hand-woven textiles. But because their characteristics, they're very fine and strong and flexible. So my idea was, what if I make a mesh with these fibers, not unlike what leather is? You know, our skin is a mesh of fibers. And that was the beginning of this new material, which is Pinetex.
Hinojosa works with pineapple farmers in the Philippines who harvest and strip the fibers from the leaves. This raw material is then shipped to Spain.
To make a square meter of Pinetex, we need 460 leaves, which is the equivalent to the leaves of 16 plants. And then if you think in a really big scale, there's about 13 million leaves of waste in the world. And that would really make us approximately, hypothetically, if we used all of them, 550 million square meters of Pinetex.
Since launching in mid-2015, the company has been co-opted by about 500 manufacturers, including a recent collaboration on a pair of vegan sneakers.
People always want to touch it. People come in, they'll see it, they're attracted to it. At first, most of the time they think it's leather, and then they feel it doesn't feel like leather, and they ask questions, and they're very intrigued.
The versatility of the new material is gaining appreciation and interest from manufacturers.
This is my neoclassic biker jacket, made by Altier, out of Pinetex. I've worn this for about a year, and it ages to your body really gracefully and molds to your body. When it gets wet, it dries like leather and it behaves like leather in every way, except it's completely sustainable.
Hinojosa is exploring new markets, including interior furnishing and car upholstery.
People are intrigued by the material. They're very curious, and because it's new, it's a slow burner. It takes time, but it's definitely picking up. People are becoming more aware, more interested, and more excited about it, and talking about it and seeking it out, which is very exciting.
Critics of the leather industry decry its use of chemicals with tannery waste containing large amounts of pollutants. That might just create a gap that the pineapple material could exploit. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
We're going to a short break now. We've got all the sport coming up, including Manchester United appoint Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as interim manager.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.
Manchester United have hired Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as manager until the end of the season. This brings the Norwegian back to the club 20 seasons after he scored the winning goal in a memorable UEFA Champions League final. United announced the appointment of Solskjaer a day after inadvertently posting